Right then, who is CX-2? Season 3 of The Bad Batch had its fair share of mysteries, but the identity of this specific clone, dubbed CX-2, has spawned the most theories. I'm going to run through a few of them. Some I've seen others suggest, and some that have spawned in the madness that is my brain. I'll decide whether they might be right, whether I want them to be right, but most importantly, determining how much more mental scarring it would cause, as is the nature of this show I apparently enjoy. But first, a quick refresher on who CX-2 is. We first met this clone, dubbed Clone X, in Season 2, Episode 7, as an assassin working for the Empire, then revealed to be a conditioned, i.e. brainwashed clone, with their identifying number white. When he was captured, he proceeded to remove himself from active duty. In Season 3, Episode 6, we're introduced to another one of these clone assassins called CX-1. After he was captured, he was removed from active duty by CX-2, the third of these clone commandos we've seen. CX-2 has managed to stick around likely until the end of the series now, and that ability to survive more than an episode has likely rightfully led some people to believe that this specific CX clone will play a larger role in the story, and quite possibly could be a character we already know. But then, who is CX-2? Let's run through some theories. Let's just get this one out of the way. Ever since we saw CX-2 in the trailer for Season 3, people have been theorising that it's the return of my personal favourite clone. Although he was seemingly removed from active duty, yes, that's what I'm calling it now, A, we technically didn't see a body, and B, this is Star Wars. Does death actually work on anyone? Now, if he did survive in any way, we know that Hemlock, the weird, creepy cloning dude, would be in possession of his body given that he found his goggles. And CX-2's ability to remain part of the plot does suggest some level of competence beyond that of a reg. Also be an enormous emotional gut punch, not just to the Batch themselves, but all of us watching to know that not only did Tech survive in some way, but he's now being forced into the service of the Empire. We'll add that CX-2's voice, while seemingly a little all over the place, has had potential hints of being a bit more British sounding, more similar to Tech's. That's something that other people have picked up on. So, do I think it's Tech? Probably not. The big thing going against it being Tech now is that there'll be quite a bit of story to tell with that. What with the Batch probably wanting to save him. The issue there is that we don't really have the time left. We're running out of episodes and there's already a ton of other story developments left. There just wouldn't be the time to do that story justice, I don't think. And it wouldn't make sense to tell that story without doing it outside of the series. It's not impossible, it just feels like something too much to do right at the end. I'll give it about a 5 out of 10 chance. But would I want it to be Tech? No, God, please no. Not only do I not think my heart could take it, it would, to me, lessen the impact of one of the most emotional moments in all of Star Wars. Tech's story's been told, it wouldn't do him justice to bring him back just for a shock moment at the end. Sometimes characters should stay dead. In fact, most of the time they should stay dead, so that when someone does come back, it actually means something. But if it's not Tech, then who else could it be? Now, this is a loose thread. We last saw Commander Cody in Season 2, Episode 3, where he ends up supposedly deserting the Empire. We don't actually see him leave, though. He just questions his actions as part of the Empire, and remarks that clones can make their own decisions, unlike droids. And then nothing. I'm saying that's not just in the Bad Batch as well. That is the latest point in the timeline that we have seen Cody. And Cody being revealed to be CX-2, not only would that be a huge reveal and emotional shock for the viewer, but also for a certain other clone that will very likely be involved in the finale of the show. So it'd work with Cody's story, it'd mean something to the fans, there's nothing post-Bad Batch that would need explaining for this twist. Is there anything going against it? The main argument against it for me would be that while it'd be really impactful for Rex, and to a lesser extent Crosshair, the show isn't called Captain Rex, it's called The Bad Batch, and other possibilities feel like they'd have a bigger impact on the Batch's story specifically. The other little bit that I consider is the scrapped plans for Cody to show up in the Kenobi series. Him being planned for, that show means that they may have already had a different plan for him to have beyond the story being told here, or him being pulled from that may mean that there was a plan for him here they didn't want to contradict. In reality, it's him not being in another series is probably not connected to the Bad Batch at all, but that's less fun to think about. So do I think it's Cody? Quite possibly. Honestly, probably one of my frontrunner options. It works with the narrative so far for him and provides an emotional shock for the audience. Cody's relative detachment from the Batch could work against him, but also could work in his favour that they wouldn't need to expand on his story in this show. They could easily reveal it as Cody and leave his fate somewhat ambiguous, ready to tell the rest of his story somewhere else, all while wrapping up the story of the Bad Batch. So I'm giving Cody an 8 out of 10. Do I want it to be Cody? Sure, it works well with the story. It's an interesting twist. I'd probably prefer something a bit more Batch-centric though. So maybe Cody, but what about another clone we've seen before? We've met plenty of clones over the years, especially in the Clone Wars. Oh wow, really? There were clones in the Clone Wars? Never would have guessed. Now I could put any old Clone Wars clone's name up on screen right now and then talk about how there's a good chance it's a clone we already know and it'd be a shock and all that. That's lazy and cheating, even if, you know, it's just one of the many clones we know and love already reappearing. Instead, I'm naming a name. Could it be... Alright, Cast and Tell, this is not an original Michael idea. I saw this one suggested a while back and I loved it. For those of you who don't know or remember Dogma, he was a clone introduced to us in the Umbara arc in Season 4 of the Clone Wars. In the events of the 4 episodes when we meet Dogma, he blindly follows the orders of Jedi Master Pong Krell, including being willing to execute his own brothers, and even remaining loyal for some time after finding out Krell had set 2 clone battalions up to kill each other. Dogma eventually sees reason once Krell admits his betrayal, and the arc ends with Dogma executing Krell and being taken into custody. And then that's it. That's the last time we saw Dogma. So a clone who realised blindly following orders is bad, being programmed into blindly following orders. Now that could be a compelling story. Also, with Dogma being in custody already, it's likely Hemlock would have access to him. Well, is it Dogma? It's incredibly unlikely. It'd be very out of left field. There's been no mention of him in the series at all. It'd probably come across as a bit of a shock for the sake of a shock. I think it'd be incredibly cool to see Dogma again, even potentially as CX-2, but I just don't think it'd fit. So Dogma gets a 3 out of 10. So it's probably not that theory I saw online. But what about this one? No. 0 out of 10, it's not Boba Fett. It'd make no sense. I've only included this one because someone thought Cad Bane's line of Boba Fett is a cold-blooded killer who worked with the Empire could relate to this. Did we forget about The Empire Strikes Back? That's what he's talking about. We're moving on from this one. Well, not literally no one, but no one we already know. What if this is another Marok situation? Is it just some other generic clone? You know, I usually try to be wary of over-speculating, especially in Star Wars, because becoming overly attached to a theory only to see it be wrong and harming your enjoyment of a story is something that I think a lot of people have suffered from. That being said, I don't think this is a Marok situation. They've positioned CX-2 as a major character across the season and kept their identity secret. Logically, it makes sense for there to be a reveal of their identity in some way. I'll go for a 2 out of 10 for it being no one. It's not impossible, but come on, this has to be someone. Okay, so what if instead of being no one, it's everyone? I've mentioned the weird voice thing. It feels like it's almost multiple voices that's coming from CX-2. Well, it's all D. Bradley Baker, but let's not entirely break kayfabe here. What if CX-2 is an amalgamation of all of the Bad Batch in one clone, the ultimate agent for the Empire with skills of all of the Batch? Why wouldn't the Empire want that? But while the motive is there from the Empire, and it certainly would be something that would mess with all our brains, the Batch included, A, it feels too weird. Like, I went a bit too crazy the day I had this idea. And B, the motive is there, but the means, not so much. Hemlock had access to Crosshair and maybe Tech, but not really any of the rest of them. Except Omega, but I feel like mixing Omega into that would be, like, so far too weird they can't do that. So I'm giving this a 1 out of 10. I'm pretty confident it's not happening, but my pride won't let me give it a 0. Right, enough messing around. What's my actual best idea? Now, this is the idea I've held on to for the longest. We know something happened to Crosshair on Tantis. He's been left with the shaky hand and seems traumatized by something, but we still don't know really what happened. He claims the CX conditioning didn't work on him, but what if it worked on a clone of him instead? The clone retains Crosshair's abilities, but none of his memories, making him susceptible to the CX conditioning. And it'd be great commentary on the clones being much more than their genetics, and it'd explain both Crosshair's trauma and his knowledge of the CX project. Whether he knows who CX-2 is, could go either way. Right, I was all on board with that, and I was going to claim it as my best guess until I saw this suggestion instead. We're expecting an emotional gut punch. What if the Crosshair we've been with all season is actually the clone? Well, the clone of the clone. What if the tremor is actually a result of an imperfect cloning attempt? What if Crosshair is being coy, about what happened on Tantis because he doesn't really remember because he's not the original. Now, unless we need Hemlock to create a clone that is basically instantly a fully functioning adult, which we haven't really seen. It's not impossible, but it would be new in this time period, really. Well, what scores am I giving these two ideas? I'm saying a 9 out of 10 that one of these is a clone of Crosshair. I keep changing my mind which way round it will be. I think this way round makes more sense. Just because I think a new clone would be easy to force into serving the Empire, and it would stand by Crosshair's choice to leave meaning something. But you know, him choosing to leave the Empire and not being able to would mean so much as well. Basically, I think this way round is the logical choice. This way round is the emotional choice. Either way, hearts are getting broken. So there's 8-ish theories for who CX-2 is. Whoever it ends up being, you just know that the end of this series is going to attempt to break our hearts all over again. And let's not read too much into the fact that one of my favourite shows exists to cause me emotional distress. You know, I think Plankton puts it best where I should be going with this.
Goodbye, everyone. I'll remember you all in therapy.